We're keeping it real in the new African update. Get ready, y'all. Here it comes. The news. Did you know that Saudi Arabs are still selling castrated black slaves today? It's on. It happens all over Africa. Oh snap. Don't be so surprised. I mean, shit, it's what y'all been doing for thousands of years. Islam started 900 years before the Americas were even found. That's right. Sure enough. So we got to show something for the brothers and show them about slavery. They all about it. And your Caucasian mimicking hair hat lady here gonna kick it for you. She like to weave.
This is the Burrow House, a plantation home in tiny Stateburg, South Carolina, about 10 miles west of Sumter. It has been the site of many Forrest Gump-like moments. General Thomas Sumter lived here. Former Governor Stephen Miller lived here. Joel Poinsett, for whom the poinsettia is named, died here. Even Samuel Maverick, whose son became the namesake for the term independent rebel, owned this house on the property.
A lot of really important but not splashy historic people have wandered through here.
Perhaps the quietest of them all is arguably the most important story to tell. It began here in 1935 when three young girls discovered a stack of letters while playing in the basement of this home. Those letters, now held at USC's Caroliniana Library, tell the story of a slave named April.
There's been a really good job of whitewashing a very awkward discussion.
It's a hugely awkward discussion.
In 1802, a white plantation owner named William Ellison lent one of his young slaves, April, to work for a gin maker in Winsboro. April quickly became the go-to man for repairing the expensive cotton gins throughout the Sumter area.
They sent him out to the plantations and they'd take them apart. He would sharpen them on location. And that's why he heard about Stateburg. He came through here as a young man. He said, well, when he bought his freedom or whatever, he came here.
The center of plantation country, the wealthiest area of South Carolina. He changed his name. April was now known as William Ellison, the name of his former white owner. His gin business prospered. He bought this home, hundreds of acres of land, and eventually 68 slaves to work that land. Granger McCoy now lives in the Ellison home and says he often finds old cotton gin blades.
What did the Ellisons say when they come?
They looking for the home place.
All descendants of what many of us thought an impossible oxymoron, a black slave owner.
I had a black ophthalmologist come through here, Ellison. We sat on this couch right here. And his great-great-granddaddy owned 68 slaves. And here I am, white, over here. And my great-great-granddaddy didn't own any slaves. And it was like somebody blew a dog whistle in a kennel if I just kind of turned the head, not knowing how to handle all this.
Humbles you.
And what little we can learn about Ellison as a slave owner isn't pretty. The book Black Masters chronicles Ellison's life in the antebellum South and suggests that his slaves were the worst fed and clothed of any in Stateburg. It also suggests that Ellison was a slave breeder, selling off infant girls, a practice even some white owners found cruel. Whatever the case, Ellison certainly had a good relationship with other white aristocracy. This contract shows that Ellison didn't just buy a home in wealthy Stateburg, he bought it directly from former Governor Stephen Miller, a governor and former slave trading property. He was the wealthiest black man in South Carolina, the fourth wealthiest in the South, wealthier than more than 90% of whites. Just a few hundred yards from the Ellison home is the Ellison graveyard, private, neither mixed with other white nor black tombstones, symbolic of his unusual position in the pre-war South.
Next up, what still goes on in Africa to this day. Check it. Wow, they still got slaves there. That is messed up. But blacks don't care. No, no. Yep, Africans capturing and selling their own kind, making lots of money. Just mainly doing them for beads, alcohol, things like that. Pots too. It's crazy. Most incredibly, they captured and sold their own. All the girls, all the boys. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to my website, We Thought That They Were White. My name is Dontel Jackson, and like many African Americans, I was brought up in a culture deeply infused with propaganda designed to lay the blame for all of the black race's ills on the white man. It was not until I began looking into the actual histories of blacks, whites, and other races in America that I became to realize that many of, not most of, the resentment that African Americans harbor regarding our long history of abuse and exploitation has been intentionally misdirected by those who are most responsible for it to shift the blame away from themselves as a people onto the white race, who they regard as their enemies. The reality is that the white race had little to do with the slave trade that took our ancestors away from Africa and sold them into bondage into the New World. That crime was committed not by white Europeans, but by Jews who were engaged in transatlantic commerce between the Old World and the Americas, where they hoped to establish a new Jerusalem for which to rule the world by way of exploiting all races who were not members of the tribe of the chosen people. In their efforts to accomplish that goal, the white race has been hoodwinked and manipulated as suspecting pawns, much as the black race has been too. For most of the slave selling signs that you see in advertisements back in the old days had the names like Jacob, Cohen, and Sons, Levin. Indeed, these 18 ships here ran constantly back and forth, procuring slaves. All the way through, from the start to the ending. They were the ones that took them to the Jamaican Isles and British Isles, and they had to get over smallpox before they got here. It was too late. They had already got it out in the endemic population, and the Indians suffered greatly from it. But you can see here names of Moses and Sadowski, Jacob. The story of Jewish carpetbaggers and how they had come down to exploit the recently released Negroes. And what they would do is they would offer them money towards things before they had even gotten the crops for it, and it ended up being like a pawn shop right here, like a pawn shop type thing. And so they owed more than they got, and whenever their crops would come, they would owe so much of it they didn't have enough left over to make it to the next time, and it would just continue. and continue. And so here we see how the Ku Klux Klan got invented, and it had been done by William Joseph Simmons, and it was the Knights of Pythias Lodge, and they were going to make sure justice was actually being upheld because Jews had gotten in the middle of courts and things and caused a lot of problems. In fact, one of the first ones that happened that was of note, this Jewish convicted child rapist and murderer, Leo Frank, left, and he raped and killed this 14-year-old victim, Mary Fagan, on the right-hand side, and the Jews were trying to get him out of it. And whenever that happened, the Knights of Mary Fagan and the Knights of Pythias were formed together into a group of crusaders. And much like this, and their story of how they came in and they took him forcibly out, drug him out of his cell, and hung him in the name of justice. And so everybody thinks about all these Klansmen and what they did. This was the origin of the Klan. Jews made magic potions and things and books of mysteries and stuff and really exploited Negroids all the way through the 1900s and 1930s, making watered down colognes and things through all these companies that ironically were selling things in the idea that it was going to give some type of voodoo power, mojo, and things like that to black people. Really got out of hand quite a bit, but they made millions off of it. Then we have Al Jolson and the famous movie they had there, The Jazz Singer. And then we have Warner Brothers that are starting up that have actually a humble beginning of getting an actual projector from a shut down movie cinema and starting to play it in tents, and that took off to where they could eventually get their own studio or parlor and go from there. Quite amazing. Even MLK here is seen being led by the Zionist leader, and if you look at this has Joshua Herschel. This is Abraham Joshua Herschel right here, and him with Martin Luther King. And if you look, all these people that are marching with him are Jews, and indeed you saw a lot of white people marching with them, but they were Zionistic Jews trying to carry on their edict that they wanted to have, and they were using blacks to do so and to carry it out. Booker T. Washington once famously said, "There is another class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown in a settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose its grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs." Keeping it real. And that's your African update. Yep. Can't wait for part 2.